Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show for you this week. Lots to talk about. There's a new Honda Civic. There may be a sporty version of the Ford Maverick, which I would love to see. All kinds of interesting news of cars coming and going, including the Tesla Semi and the Volkswagen ID.7. Plenty of things to get to in the news segment. We'll talk a little bit about racing from last weekend, what happened at Imola, and what will happen at Monaco. We'll take a look ahead to that. It's also the Indy 500 and the Coke 600. It's a great weekend for watching all sorts of racing as we look ahead to that. I've been driving the CX-90. I have thoughts. Zach has been driving the Nissan Z Nismo. So with that, let's bring in road test editor Zach Palmer. How's it going, man?
I am doing swell. There is a lot to get to in this show, so I am excited to hop into it here. How are you?
I'm doing great, I was just rewatching Imola a little bit. I recorded it, and then while I was in between, did some writing this morning. Then you get that kind of like email phase of the day, and I was eating a fried egg on top of, an avocado on top of an English muffin. So it was quite delicious. Had a new bag of Starbucks coffee while I was just kind of rewatching Imola, which is still going on in the background. I didn't see as much of it this weekend as I wanted to, but we can talk about that later. But I tell you what, is there anything really better than like a Formula One breakfast? Like, to me, I just love the like 9:55 start times on the East Coast here for F1 on Sunday.
It's really like a little bit of an American tradition, almost like you wake up on a Sunday morning, you sit down to some breakfast, some tea, some coffee, whatever, and you watch F1. It's interesting because I was just at the Miami Grand Prix here a couple weeks ago, and I was talking with some Brits actually who were there, also covering the race. And they were really commenting just on like the American culture of watching Formula One in the morning. And they're like, that actually sounds really neat, because for us, it's always like, oh, all right, we're going to go to the pub. It's like 3, 4, 5 p.m. in the evening. And it's sort of like an NFL football game timing for us. But no, for us, it's like roll out of bed in the morning, breakfast. And I mean, I've gotten really used to just having that be like a Sunday morning mainstay. It's really nice, and we're in this European stretch right now, so that's just going to keep being a thing.
It's my favorite part of the season, to be honest. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, talk a little bit about, takeaways from the race and what may play up for the rest of the season a little bit later in the show. Let's talk about what's going on in the sheet metal, though. A refreshed Honda Civic debuts this week. That's fairly significant. Some design changes, which are pretty subtle, in my opinion, and some light tech updates as well. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so the big news here, I really think, is the hybrid powertrain. So Honda obviously offed the Insight here a couple years ago. So there's been a couple years without like a compact, super efficient Honda out there. No Civic Hybrid, no Insight. So what are you going to do? Well, bring back the Civic Hybrid. So this is the powertrain from the Accord Hybrid and CR-V Hybrid, just sort of toned down a little bit. But even in that toned down state, 200 horsepower, 232 pound-feet of torque. For those counting, that's the same amount of horsepower as the Civic Si and a boatload of more torque. So yeah, it's probably going to be quicker than the Civic Si. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And yeah, so it's on the top two trims, both the Sport and the Sport Touring. You can get this hybrid, and while you're going that fast, Honda says it's going to get nearly 50 miles per gallon as well. So it's a great number. Honestly, like, all of the numbers are really good. I know that a number of us have already driven this same powertrain in the CR-V hybrid and an Accord hybrid, and it is really, really good. Super smooth. It's that Honda dual motor power system that, it sort of feels like you're driving an EV, just because there is no like physical transmission. It's just direct drive from the electric motor. And yeah, it's going to be great. I think it's going to be really, really good. The one sad thing powertrain related, though, is that the 1.5 liter turbo is dropped from the regular one. And that, of course, was where Honda offered the manual before. So I know one of my personal favorite Civics I have a lot of favorite Civics because it's a really, really great car. Up and down the lineup was the Sport Touring with the manual transmission, specifically the hatchback. Really, really great car for like $27,000. So much utility, a ton of fun to drive. But that car is gone now with this refresh. So it is no more. So if you want one, 2024 is the last year to go get it. I'm sure that they really didn't sell that many of them just because, if you're an enthusiast and you want a hot Honda with a manual, you probably just bought the SI, or if you had more money, you bought the Civic Type R. But no, like it's sad to see it go, but hey, at least there will still be manuals within the Civic lineup.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more and more that's a trend. The manuals are offered not so much on the general offering because the take rate is so low. You might see them on some of the sportier versions, and that's fine. I'm looking forward to driving the Civic. This is the 11th generation we're still in, and this is the mid-cycle refresh. I think it's substantive. I think they did some things to make the car more competitive. It's already obviously, at or near the top of the class, but you can't stay still. So I think they did just enough to keep this where it needs to be, and looking forward to getting behind the wheel later this summer.
Hey, same.
All right. So another one I'm very much looking forward to is perhaps some sort of Maverick sport truck. We are speculating here, but I think that's something fun to do here, the enthusiast press. So we have spy shots of the Maverick looking kind of low. It's got big wheels, and it was spied on public roads. You could head over to Autoblog if you want to see the sights. Something kind of funky going on with the grill. Can't quite say what. But it looks pretty good. And I think when I look at the Ford, the truck lineup, I think the Maverick is one where they have a lot of room to add something sporty. And I think they should. I think because it effectively replaced the Focus, which itself had some sporty variants, I think there's people who are looking to spend this amount of money and be in this sort of place in the market that would be very receptive to that. Plus, I think you get some of the enthusiasts Ford sport truck buyers who maybe aren't having their needs met, who might be willing to even pay a little bit more. So we don't know exactly what is being, seen here on public roads. We never totally do with spy shots, but I think they should do this if this is some sort of Maverick sport. What do you think?
I am 100% for it. So I drove the Maverick for the first time, I want to say like 2 years ago at this point, and it was the 2.0 turbo with all-wheel drive. And like after 20 or 30 minutes of driving it, I was like, you know what this truck should be? So they should make an ST version of it.
Yes.
It should have the 2.3 liter turbo from the Mustang. It should have all-wheel drive. It should have a torque vectoring diff like the Tremor has, and it should be lowered and with like sport tune suspension. And it would be great. It would be so fun because it handles well as is. Make it handle even better. Make it look cool. Give it some power. Maybe a little throaty exhaust. This is exactly what the Maverick is begging for, I think. So, I mean, I don't know if this is any indication it's actually going to happen, but if Ford is out there considering a performance Maverick, I think that would be a huge win, and I would love to drive one. And I bet that people would buy it too.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a good way for Ford to play a little bit around the edges, but play at some of its core customers, people who would very much like this, and then maybe stay with the rest of the Ford family as they look at their next purchases. Because sometimes you have these sort of, gateway offerings that are like the tip of the spear, to use a cliche. But I think that's what this could be. So I like it a lot. Now, here's something. Do you remember that Mitsubishi sells cars here? You may have forgotten that. I think that's easy to do at times. But they've actually been doing okay. They've had some decent product launches in the last few years. I drove the Outlander and I liked it. I also drove the hybrid version. It's a plug-in, and I drove that and I like that as well. So they're a little bit off the radar, but they're playing in areas currently like crossovers, obviously, with a hybrid variant that is what a lot of people are looking for. So I think they're in the right spots. They just, they need to kind of get the word out again. And one way I think they could do that is to throw out some new products. I think that would make a ton of sense. They have confirmed or planned that they're going to bring an off-road styled van here. I believe it's the Delica. Am I saying that right? Maybe you know more than I do.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good move. I think it's the right size. This concept that we saw that it was the DX, kind of cool looking. If they did something like that, I think that could give them a lot of room to run. I think Mitsubishi has always done a really good job of catering to enthusiast tastes, sometimes to pretty niche areas. And this could be a way to do it because it would be at least nominally a crossover. So I like it. I think this would be a good play for them, but I think they should do this.
Yeah, I mean, anything that Mitsubishi can do to like bring another model into the market. I mean, what I love for it to be like a new Mitsubishi Evo.
Well, of course, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But a rugged off-road van is also pretty cool, I think, too. So, I mean, if this is the direction that they want to go in, I mean, it looks like they're poking around at like a plug-in hybrid powertrain, which that seems to be the hot setup with vans these days. You got the Pacifica hybrid, and then the Sienna is just a regular series hybrid, but just good fuel economy from a platform that I think you can really take advantage of with electrification. Makes a lot of sense. And like you mentioned off the top, they already have the Outlander plug-in hybrid. So there's some powertrain sitting around that may or may not work for this. And yeah, man, just more minivans I think we need. Like the market is, well, there's not many of them out there. And there certainly are no off-road minivans. So Mitsubishi could have themselves something unique. And, maybe you don't want to go full EV like the Volkswagen ID Buzz that is coming here soon. Come get your adventure van from Mitsubishi with a plug-in that still has a gas engine.
Now, something interesting at the bottom of the story that perhaps is even more interesting than a van is that Mitsubishi is looking to bring in some sort of pickup truck, perhaps to the United States. They certainly have some in their global portfolio. I feel like that's like something everybody's looking at doing is what sort of mid-sized small pickup might be sold in the U.S. And we love trucks around here, especially maybe slap some sort of hybrid configuration in it. They haven't sold a truck here since I'll bet you a beer on this. What was the last truck they sold here? Without reading the story.
Without reading the story, what was the last truck that Mitsubishi sold here? I honestly could not tell you.
The Raider, like the Oakland Raiders or the Vegas Raiders. And it was based on the then Dodge Dakota. So, which I do remember that little bit of deep trivia as I think about it. Because if you ever saw one, you're like, is that a Dakota or what is that? So could work. I mean, they've been leaning on Nissan quite a bit for some of their product development. I think they could lean on somebody to help facilitate a mid-sized, smallish truck. So more trucks is the theme of the podcast so far. Hybrid sales are up 50% this year, speaking of hybrids. And I think what we're seeing is here's my thought. I think people are getting the electric message from all sorts of different places. And I think they are thinking about it. And I think a lot of people are deciding, I'm interested. I want to go electric, but I don't think I want to do the whole thing right now. I think some people certainly are because EV sales are up and they could go from 8 to even 12% of the US market this year. So there's that. But I think just having that broad conversation has brought people into the conversation. And now they're thinking, okay, well, do I want to go electric? Maybe they weren't thinking it before. Now they are. And then maybe the answer is no, but that's where hybrids get the sort of runoff. And sales are up 50% this year. That's kind of bonkers. It was almost 1.2 million units. That's up from about 766,000 in 22. That 1.2 million figure is for 2023. We're still tallying the numbers from the year before. These numbers come from energy.gov. So I think that's interesting. I think they were fairly flat for a while. And then we did see A little bit of a tick up in 2020, then the huge leap in 21, bit of a fall off in 22, then this huge leap going forward. So I think pricing and availability is likely why. And early figures say they're up 46% in the first quarter. So, the way I look at this is I try to throw politics out of it. And what I tell people, what works for you in your life? Do you want an EV? That's awesome. Look into it. Home charging can be really fun to do. I personally like charging EVs. What's your driving habit? How much do you drive? Where do you drive? Is there charging there? If there is, how do you feel about, using that? Do you want to use perhaps a hybrid? Do you want a traditional hybrid, which doesn't involve a plug? What works for you? How do you drive? And then figure it out from there. And I've often found when giving people car buying advice, they're more interested in having hybrids and EVs explained to them. But at the end of the day, they just kind of want you to tell them what they're doing is okay. They have maybe 2 or 3 brands that they're going to really only consider. And they sort of want you to affirm that, which is fine. I mean, that's how it probably is for us when you ask somebody about a microwave or a phone or the doctor. You want them to be like, hey, yeah, this cough I have, it's fine, right? Oh, yeah, it's totally fine, right? So irrespective of nothing, hybrid sales are up. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I'm not super surprised about it. There's a few things for sure, and I think there are a lot more hybrids out these days.
Yeah.
Than even a few years ago. You look at the Honda and just like the full lineup of Toyotas out there these days too. Like you can get a hybrid in pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And it's only going to keep growing in that direction. The new 4Runner's a hybrid. The Land Cruiser,
yep,
hybrid. The new Tacoma is going to be offered in a hybrid. Like you can choose a hybrid if you want it in so many more cars than I think you used to be able to. And it's cool that people are in fact choosing that. I think that they're also looking at how values have fallen off on a lot of new EVs. You look at Tesla with the crazy price swings left and right. If you bought a Model Y when it was at its peak with like $65,000 and now they're priced at $45,000 and you lost $20,000 like overnight, that's kind of a deterrent to buying an EV. You look at, just to go away from all of the Teslas, you have like EV6s, Ioniq 5s, Mercedes EQS. Like so many of these vehicles really depreciate heavily, and they've been doing so at rates that are quicker than most gasoline and hybrid vehicles actually. So that could also be deterring people and be like, all right, hey, maybe let's just stick it out with a hybrid for a little while now. It's a whole combination of things, I think. And hybrids are also just straight up better now than they used to be.
Yes.
Like so much better. In a lot of circumstances, like the Civic right off the top, it's the highest performing vehicle. It's not like this green penalty box or anything. It's actually the quickest, most efficient, probably quietest and most refined version of the vehicle that you can buy. So yeah, hybrids are for sure having their moment right now. I think they're going to keep having their moment because we just keep getting more and more and better ones, which I'm excited to see because I think they definitely work in a lot of people's lives better than just a full BEV right now. We're still not at that point where anybody off the street can just go buy an EV and it'll perfectly fit their lives. So yeah, more hybrids the better.
All right, so let's shift gears to the kind of the business side of the world. Look at the UAW lost an organization effort at the Mercedes plant in Vance, Alabama, close to Tuscaloosa. It was a 56% no vote. As I look at this in hindsight, I guess I'm not surprised. Mercedes opposed it a little more strongly, less openly, but more strongly than it appears they did, maybe even more strongly than Volkswagen did. Obviously, the governor of the state, Kay Ivey, was very much against it. And it just, politically, it's a ruby red state. So, I mean, maybe even more so than Tennessee, where Volkswagen just succeeded. Looking at it, I kind of thought the UAW had momentum and they had the right message. And I thought that might resonate. It didn't end up being that close, though. Like 56% is fairly decisive. So I would think they probably, like the union will probably want to move on to Hyundai and Kia before taking another swing at Mercedes. But, you know, I would say this, I was surprised initially, but then after a couple days of reflection, it was kind of like, well, that would have been a really tough uphill fight for them to win. So we'll see. You know, there's plants in Georgia, other plants in Alabama, plants in South Carolina. The union has been trying to organize them for, I mean, decades. You know, they tried and failed at Chattanooga for years and then succeeded quite handily, actually, about a month ago. So I think this is a setback, and it's really the first real setback UAW President Shawn Fain has had. I think he's been winning nonstop since his stand-up strike last fall. And, you know, I think he's really been, you know, captured sort of the mood of the country, which is more pro-union than it's been in decades. So, you know, we'll see what the next move is. I don't think this is a major defeat. I think it's a tactical setback when I look at it. I think they can move on to another factory and try to organize that. And my guess is they'll probably win some and lose some. And I think the Volkswagen Mercedes prism is kind of how you'll look at maybe the next year or two of organizing efforts. And I also think the union's aiming high. You know, they went for aggressive deals with the Detroit 3, and then they didn't stop there. I think most union leaders in the past would have stopped there, but they tried to make this a broader movement. And that means, you know, again, being very aggressive and taking aim at Mercedes. And when you do that, obviously there's going to be some failures along the way. And, you know, that's kind of how it shook out. Did you see any other factors play into this?
You know, I just think that it's interesting that Fain has finally had some sort of a setback because of like how much success that he has had. Like he's won person of the year from like so many different automotive publications.
How about Autoblog?
How about Autoblog? Yeah. Exactly. Just like one of the most influential people in the automotive industry right now. Seemed like he could almost do no wrong or lose anything. I mean, he didn't lose by a lot. I mean, it is 56%. So that's certainly a lot that voted against it. But it was just interesting to see, you know, that there is one UAW setback amongst all of the hard bargaining that they have been going at, especially after saying that Volkswagen did in fact unionize. And that the UAW won there. He's just going to keep trying, though. I mean, Hyundai is looks like next, but that's also an Alabama area, and there's plenty of other plants throughout the U.S. that I know that Fain is also targeting. I guess this is proof that, you know, it might not work, and you know, maybe he'll get like half of them, maybe he'll get 25%, maybe he'll get 75%. Honestly, I'm not really sure how it's going to play out now that Volkswagen voted well. I guess now that the UAW workers at Volkswagen voted with, and Mercedes did not. So it'll be interesting to watch, honestly, over the coming months and years here to see just where it goes.
I think in this unique case too, I don't know if it's unique, but I think it's probably the most, you know, the farthest, you know, opposition the UAW will face. I think there's other states that are perhaps, you know, more or like less anti-union, but still, you know, less labor friendly, like Georgia, like South Carolina, where it's still a bit of an uphill battle as opposed to, say, the Midwest, but it'll be less so than perhaps Alabama. And also, I don't think you underestimate the role Mercedes played in this. I think they, you know, when you look at I underestimated it too, for, you know, to be honest. I thought Mercedes was taking a little more of a neutral role. As you look at some of the reporting after the fact, not so much. They they've been building in America for a while, and it was pretty clear they were happy to keep the status quo and not have to deal with some of, negotiations with the union, which could have impacted their negotiations with the unions back in Germany. So I think that might have been a broader thing that they were worried about, that they didn't want to let kind of have a domino effect here. So, and to your point, 56% is decisive, but it's not insurmountable. The union failed at Chattanooga for decades with figures like this. Eventually, it could take, maybe get it closer to 50-50, maybe a couple other plants unionize, and who knows, maybe it happens in Mercedes. I don't know. This might be one that they just never unionize as well. So we shall see. Let's move along to, this was news this morning. We're recording this on Wednesday morning. The Volkswagen ID.7 is delayed, and there is not a return date for it. I think this is very symptomatic of the fact that sedans are in flux. It's hard to tell what the business case is them for some automakers. Some, like Honda, do it quite well. Honda, Hyundai, etc. But others, like Ford, Chevy, and now Volkswagen, struggling. You wrote the story. What kind of insights? What did Volkswagen tell you?
Yeah, so you really hit on one of the main points there off the top there, in that sedans are not the hot ticket. And, we sort of knew that. Volkswagen certainly knew that going into this whole thing. But no, so they're basically putting a TBD date on the ID.7. They're not saying it's canceled. They're just saying that for now it is delayed with no target date. As for when it will come back, they also cite the very high demand in Europe and Asia for the car specifically. So they want to prioritize production for those regions, and North America will just have to wait for the time being. That doesn't mean that Volkswagen is done with EVs in the US or anything. Volkswagen, as I was asking questions to their product spokespeople, they're still very, very committed to EVs here in the US. This doesn't necessarily represent a pulling back in that perspective at all. It's more or less the growing demand elsewhere and the lessening demand for sedans in the US. It's a bit of a shame, honestly. I was certainly excited for the ID.7. It was going to be their flagship sedan here. The Arteon was discontinued about a year or so ago. So they really haven't had a really nice, luxurious flagship. The closest thing to it is the Atlas, honestly. And this was going to be a special car, I think. A really, really nice, comfortable, big sedan. And obviously those don't sell in great numbers here in the US, but I think there were a lot of Volkswagen enthusiasts that totally would have gone for something like this. And I bet that it would have been a really nice car.
I think it would have been a really nice car. I agree with you completely. I also think this is probably the right move. I don't think there is a great business case to introduce a new nameplate, a new sedan in the United States right now. I think the ID Buzz, when that arrives soon, it's the fourth quarter as I read your story of 2024. Well done. Is going to be much more what the market's looking for. I also kind of wonder, if you look at this, I don't necessarily want to mess with the recipe here. I mean, maybe I do. I could be a product planner, right? Who knows? A true sedan would be tough. But if you make it kind of like the Toyota Crown, which is a sedan, basically, but they call it a crossover, it rides a little bit higher and it's kind of a hatchback. Maybe something like that, more nominally a crossover, would give them a slightly better business case. I think that might be the secret sauce. I don't think they're going to redo the car for the US, but if they did, perhaps that would be a way to do it. Because you look at it, it's a pretty big vehicle with a pretty big looking trunk. But again, at that point, you're changing kind of the ethos of the car. So we shall see, I guess. Tesla Semi, that was new news today. I didn't expect that. Earlier this week, it sounds like they're on track is relative. That's a relative term for Tesla, but the program is still a thing. That's some news we saw this week. Some in small numbers are on the road. They've kind of been doing this for a bit, but a little bit of another beat in that story this week. And I think that, that's a part of the company that Tesla doesn't talk about very much, but I think it could be lucrative, and it could give them a baseline of business to round out what they're doing when they're getting into other riskier areas like robo-taxis and autonomous driving and trying to sort out the Model 2. I mean, America's a big country. We need our trucks to take stuff places. They can kind of get this off the ground. It's a stable, predictable business source. Ask some of the semi companies in this country, So I was actually pleasantly surprised to read that.
Yeah, so it looks like this is a fairly big expansion, honestly. So I know that initially Tesla and Pepsi were saying that they were going to have 100 trucks. Most of the reports have sort of pointed at, all right, they're using like just a fraction of those. Our story here shows that in April, only 36 of the supposedly 100 trucks that were ordered were actually in use and on the road. And apparently this is going to be an expansion of 50 more Tesla semi-trucks, which is more than are theoretically even being used on the road right now. So, I mean, that's obviously like a good sign, I would say, for it, and that they are, they're continuing to make them. Obviously still in very, very small numbers and still only in partnership with PepsiCo here. But it is, positive news, I'd say, for the Tesla Semi, which we don't get much news of very often, honestly. So more of them. I've still never seen one on the road here in Michigan. I'm not sure that they get up here. I'm guessing it's not anywhere within their route, but it will be cool the first time that I see one on the road. I'm sure it'll be an exciting little treat if we ever do see them, and they continue to expand.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it'll be, the novelty will be through the roof. All right. And then lastly, news came out last week. We'll round up the news section with the BYD Shark will be sold in Mexico. It's actually a pretty good looking little truck. I think this news came out literally as I think President Biden was putting tariffs on vehicles imported from China. So if this were to come to the United States, it would, impact that, obviously. There is a bit of a loophole of having trucks or vehicles made in Mexico, which can then be sold in the United States. So I don't totally grasp the business case here. But looking at this product, I think, there's a lot of low-cost vehicles made in China, some of which appear to be pretty appealing, some of which appear to be very much just commodity rides that I don't personally think Americans would be all that interested in. I think this truck, though, is something that people might be interested in. And I think BYD is a brand that has been around long enough that I think they're on, like, car journalists know who they are. And I think they're starting to creep into, like, the edge of the public consciousness. So this is a vehicle where I could see, if they can figure out the tariffs, the business case, all that stuff, this is something that I think this looks pretty good. All I've seen is the pictures, right? Because wasn't at the reveal. But this to me looks like a credible product. So that could be, maybe among the first wave. How do you see this shaking out?
Yeah, it just like you said, it looks like a credible truck. It's a mid-size truck, so like a Ford Ranger, Chevy Colorado sort of size. It's also a plug-in hybrid, which is pretty neat. The towing is, it's not that great at about 5,500 pounds. So most other mid-sizers beat it out there. But again, it's a hybrid with a fairly small gas engine and electric motor helping it out. The interior looks nice, as pretty much every BYD vehicle that I have seen out there. It's rugged, but also pretty tech forward, I'd say, versus a lot of, if you look at like a Toyota Tacoma, this is definitely a lot more tech focused than that. And the price,
who knows, right?
If you convert to US dollars, it's about 54 grand, but who actually knows what that would mean, if it were to ever actually come here. with all of the tariffs and whatever else might be applied at this point. It's looking fairly expensive though, regardless, I think, of where it is. And just to try to convince people to buy a BYD over all of these other brands that they are very familiar with, I think would certainly be a tough task, especially at the start, before more people know about them.
I think you would have to, this is where it's tough. And this is where obviously tariffs come into play as you look at like global macroeconomic conditions. That's what tariffs do, is they try to keep, certain competitive vehicles out of the segment, which would protect domestics and things like the Toyota Tacoma. But again, I think this truck, it looks interesting. You're looking at like 30 or 40 miles of electric range. It apparently offers fast charging, which is kind of bizarre for a plug-in hybrid. But it would have to win on price because nobody's going to trade their Tacoma, 46,000, I think, or their Ranger, which I believe starts in like the upper 40s. You're just not going to have somebody you're not going to conquest that buyer unless your truck is 39. So, and that's again, the tariffs come into play there, which would make it so it would be 50. I guess they, again, like we said off the top, they could find a way to build it in Mexico, which does circumvent some of it because plenty of cars sold in the US are built in Mexico and they don't have tariffs. So that could work. So we'll see. But I thought it was interesting just looking at the product itself. It's a very creative, use in the segment, plug-in hybrid midsize truck that looks pretty good. It's kind of cool. So we'll see where it goes. All right. We led off the show with some chatter about Imola. It was a decent race, I thought, as I'm working my way through it here. I believe you saw much of it. I will just say this. I think Imola is one of my favorite tracks to watch a race on TV. I've never been to one, but I would love to go to a race at Imola for obvious reasons. The broadcast was nice, and the fact that they, showed it against the context of Senna, which is kind of cool, kind of sad. And it's an old school racing circuit. It's very European. I think the first race there was in 1980, which ironically was because Monza was doing like repairs or a renovation, which, I don't look at 1980 as like the end of, the world, but it is still 44 years ago compared to some of these newer circuits that are like, they look like PlayStation tech circuits. They're just so futuristic with the lights, the night races, some of the interesting turns. And I love watching those too. Those are great. But just you watch a race at Imola and it is from a different time. Because even though the first F1 race was in 80, the area, the history, there's so much, great lineage in that region. It's so deeply associated with Italian culture and automaking. So, Max won, so cut to the chase. If anybody didn't see that, sorry, spoiler alert. I don't know what you think of the race.
Yeah, there was a lot of anticipation around McLaren, I think, once again in this, just because obviously Lando was able to pull it out in Miami in pretty grand fashion and, beat Max by a shocking margin. Versus what we were used to from Max beating others by a shocking margin. And most of the race, Lando was hanging around, but he wasn't exactly close until the end, where he did honestly pull pretty close to Max and kept him there. And honestly, like the last few laps were pretty exhilarating to watch. Just watching that gap, like, oh, is he going to get into DRS? Is he not going to get into DRS? Like, is he going to be able to make a lunge? And I think just like that being a possibility, of like there being a pass close to the last lap of a race over Max Verstappen by someone else, is just like a huge positive move for this season, in that it really has just felt like, Max is going to win every single race by a mile, and the race is really for second, third, etc. So I don't know that this is just, further proof that I think McLaren and Lando specifically can take the fight to Max and Red Bull. And I hope that we see more of it as the season goes on. Obviously we have Monaco, which Max is very good at here. this week, but I have a feeling that it's going to be super close again. I don't know if you saw the liveries that McLaren will be running in Monaco, but they are super cool. Speaking of the Imola heritage and Senna, it is 30 years since Senna had his crash at Imola. They're doing some really, really nice heritage stuff to honor him. And it's a really great McLaren car, Brazilian flag themed, just like Senna's helmet. It's obviously it is the McLaren's as well, because that is where Senna had pretty much all of his success. Really, really cool stuff there from McLaren, and I have a feeling there's going to be even more interesting liveries and stuff to come out over the course of the week.
I love that livery. I think that looks just outstanding. Monaco's fun. It's a nice kind of touchstone for the long holiday weekend here in the United States. Especially, you can watch that, then go straight to watch Indy, which is great. Looking forward to the race. Senna has the most wins at Monaco. Interesting trivia. He won 6 times there. I can't believe it's been 30 years. Honestly, I would have said 40 years. That wouldn't track, I guess, when you think about it. But just, I don't know, time is time, and it just, history seems to be, it seemed like a long time ago. So I was a little surprised it had been only 30 years. I don't know, kind of weird. But I'm looking forward to Monaco. I drove on the streets of Monaco. It's a street track for an Audi S3 trip a few years back. They took us through certain parts of they were public roads, but through parts of it that were, known to be signature parts of where the Grand Prix is run, which was kind of cool. We were only going like 40 miles an hour or whatever that is in kilometers, but it was cool to experience. It's definitely outside of Vegas. It's, definitely a one-off as far as the culture of, where it sits on the F1 calendar, but I like it a lot. It's, I wouldn't say it's my favorite Grand Prix. There's something about it that's so over the top that give me more like, Belgium or Monza or Silverstone or Imola, but it's still a great race, love it. So really looking forward to it.
Great race. Probably my favorite qualifying session of the year. But yeah, like you said, the race is normally a bit of a parade with how big the cars are these days. I almost jokingly said, like, the last few years, as I've been watching it, that they should have like specific cars for Monaco that are like half the size of the regular F1 cars. So that they can actually maybe pass each other. Because the cars are just so big these days that it's almost impossible to make a move. And they're just sort of parading around and hoping that they can win the pit stop war. I guess there was weather here recently, and that can really shake things up. But that's pretty much the only thing that can, make the race have a lot of overtakes in it. But regardless, hey, Monaco, Indy, busy Sundays for everyone who loves motorsports coming up.
Yeah, no, you got Indy 500, 12:45, so like right after Monaco, then Coke 600. We'll have coverage for all those races this weekend. There's not a lot of news because, thankfully, hopefully there isn't a lot of news, but it's a good time to watch your favorite racing series. So, yeah, looking forward to it. And this is also, I'd say, this and next weekend, the following weekend, with the Detroit Grand Prix. It's like the 2 times a year I probably watch a fair amount of IndyCar. I think, looking forward to it. I think I might even try to make it down to the street course in Detroit. We had an email exchange. Are you going?
I am going to plan to go.
Okay.
I am. I'm going to plan to go on Sunday, I think.
Okay.
So not going to be able to make the IMSA race on Saturday, but I will be aiming to hit the IndyCar race on Sunday. So definitely looking forward to that. I
think I maybe try to do that as well. So we'll see. Should be. It's always fun. And I, just looking ahead again to Detroit, Belle Isle was very special, having the race on this island that floats between Detroit and Canada. I like the street course a little bit better. Downtown Detroit, I just like the vibe. It was a little bit easier to get to, which is surprising. Although parking was insane. It was crazy. But I just like the view. You have the Rensen. It just feels very old school. It looks like those pictures of when F1 races were run here. So pretty cool.
Exactly. No, I'm 100% with you. The backdrop is iconic to be racing through the streets of Detroit. Like, there's nothing cooler than that as far as Michigan racetracks go, as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed. It's iconic. All right. So you know what's not iconic is our long-term Mazda CX-90. I am wrapping up my stint in it, at least for now, in a few hours. Senior editor for all things electric, Ed Green, John Snyder, is bringing a Porsche Boxster to my house. I could not be more psyched about that car. So we'll talk about that maybe next week or in the coming weeks. But this has been a good month, maybe even 5-6 weeks, maybe, with the Mazda. To kind of just look at it, the overview, I have liked it generally. I would give it maybe like a B- grade. I love how it looks. I generally like the interior, the black leather, this kind of bronze stitching that's on the dashboard, the seats, looks great. A lot of leather. It's a little dark in there, which gets kind of dirty pretty quick because it's 3-row crossover. It's used for family duty, so it's going to get dirty. I'm going to do my best to get it clean before John gets here. It's got a lot of gas, so that's frankly always paramount. Holds a ton of stuff. There's some camping chairs, golf clubs, baseball equipment, you name it is in there. It's basically a sporting goods store in there at the moment. So I got a lot of work to do. We should probably wrap up this podcast. Sticking with the interior though, and I'd like to hear what you think. The radio bugged me. Like, I would slice the infotainment into two parts. I thought the nav was pretty good. It's colorful. It's pretty easy to use. It got me where I wanted to go. The radio was a real pain, I thought, trying to toggle back to, I don't think we actually have satellite activated right now, but FM, just trying to go different stations. It wouldn't just let me scroll from like a sports station, which I listened to semi-religiously, to just get some music or go to NPR. I couldn't get any of that. It kept taking me back to like the very start of the band. I found that endlessly frustrating. The knob and the button combination, which Mazda and other brands have used for years, it's a little clunky. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely feel your pain with the radio. It is not a great radio interface if you're trying to toggle between stations. I think what Mazda really needs there, and they do have a lot of good physical buttons. They just need some preset buttons, almost like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that you could set, and not have to go through their twist knob situation, or just literally make it a touch screen and allow people to scroll through that way. So that part of the infotainment system, yeah, I'm 100% with you there. However, I'm not a big radio listener, honestly. Like, if I am going to listen to the radio, it's probably just going to be NPR that I'm going to throw on, at the top of the hour or something, listen to like a 20-30 minute segment. Most of the time, I'm going to use Apple CarPlay, listen to Spotify, podcasts, etc. For that purpose, I really do love the infotainment system. I think it works really well there because you can actually put it into a touchscreen mode when you're using Apple CarPlay. The touch works there, and you can also use the twist knob and buttons as well to toggle between the nav and your media. And I think that is also pretty easy and nice to use. So yeah, some pluses there for sure, but also some negatives if you're trying to use like the native navigation system or the native radio interface. Yeah, it's very basic and I don't know, just lacking in features and control, I think. So yeah, ups and downs really for me with that infotainment system.
To me, that sums up the car. Love the styling. I think it looks great. Perhaps the most attractive vehicle in the segment. That's subjective, but I like it. It's clean. Santa Fe brings a lot to the conversation. Chevys are pretty well styled up, although I think this looks better than the Traverse. But definitely gives you that almost, I'll go there, cliche sports car look with that long hood. The way the sheet metal is so clean, but just enough kind of styling in there. So I like that. It's got big wheels, again, clean lines. Good looking crossover. It's not easy to make a 3-row crossover look good without making it almost like a cartoonish off-road or super bland, but they did that. So I give them a ton of credit there. Steering, somewhat of a mixed bag. I landed on liking it, but not necessarily liking it for this. It's very sporty. It's weighted. It's a bit of a workout to drive. When you drive a 3-row crossover, most of the time you've got dogs, people, kids, stuff. You might only be steering with one hand. You shouldn't be, but you might often be doing that, even if you're just sipping your coffee or queuing up the latest podcast on Spotify. So in that sense, I found it to be a little bit more work to drive, especially on the expressway. But when you're dialed in, it is a rewarding experience. So my kind of where I landed is this is the 3-row crossover for Mazda buyers. It's like Subaru with the Ascent. They wanted to bring up some of those buyers from Forester and Outback, and other brands as well have used this strategy. I think it's a good one to employ, but I don't think you're going to get too many new crossover buyers to Mazda if they drive it first, because I think it could be off-putting. They'll be like, it's not what I'm used to in my Ford Explorer or in my Honda Pilot, and it's going to be a weird experience. So it's sporty, it's enthusiastic, but for this segment, it's different.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on the steering. Like I know I wrote in one of my long-term updates for the car. It's like sports car steering. Honestly, like it is shockingly heavy, feelsome. You know what the front end is doing around corners.
Yeah,
like, it's cool. It's
great. Good in some ways.
That's sweet. Like no 3-row crossover has that. It's just not a thing in this segment. So yeah, that's all good. But to that exact same point, which I also wrote in my update, like I don't necessarily think that this is a smart idea for most 3-row SUV buyers out there, because they're going to get in the car. They're going to be like, why is this so much effort around the parking lot? Like, what is this? Like, is there something wrong with the steering? Because it's just like sports car heavy. I just wish that there was, you could put it into like a comfort and a sport mode. And I would honestly probably drive it around a lot in the basic comfort mode, just because that feels right for a big 3-row SUV. And then when you want, go ahead and throw it in sport and you get that great feelsome steering back. It's a weird conundrum that I understand where Mazda's coming from. Like everything is always tuned for enthusiasts and whatnot, but like guys, you're trying to compete with like a Hyundai Palisade and like a Honda Pilot. I'm not sure that this needs to feel like a Miata.
I think if the move here, if you want that sporty feel, is to get the straight 6, which I call that a gem of an engine. I think it's 3.3 liters, great engine, really. At that point you do have literally your sports car in your 3-row crossover. I would tell you probably not to get the PHEV. I want to like it. I did charge it, really enjoyed it. I got 21 miles of charge, and I charged it at the Bagley Mobility Hub. That's like right adjacent to Ford's new train station that they're revitalizing in downtown Detroit. Tons of chargers there. If you're in town for the Detroit Grand Prix, charge there, park there, charge there. Great place. I didn't get the full 26, which was weird because it seemed like I should have, because I was there for the requisite amount of time, but I was okay with 21. That's, I think you and I have had this discussion where we kind of say it feels like a first gen hybrid, almost like how like the Volt and the Leaf and things like that felt 10 years ago. So I guess I wasn't surprised. It didn't work exactly as it should have. But that to me is the biggest single flaw for this. Is the other stuff is subjective. Maybe you like the styling, maybe you don't. Maybe you like the steering, maybe you don't. But you're going to want to get the straight 6. You're not going to want to get the plug-in hybrid unless you really want to have the hybrid experience, because the driving experience is not great, Bob. It's clunky. What you're working with here is a 4-cylinder engine. You're working with electrical components. And then an 8-speed transmission, and none of them seem to want to get along very well. I think it's in my long-term update that I'm working on. I feel like the 8-speed's always trying to find the right gear and not often succeeding. I feel like it holds the downshifts a little bit too long. And then sometimes when I think it's upshifting, it's like a thunk or something. Like you feel this like clunk, visceral it's not vibrating, but it's like, it is like a feel. And I think that's very disconcerting. And then, so that's a thing. And then oftentimes it feels plodding is the word I used. It feels like it's trying to start in EV mode, which is great, but then it doesn't get into gas mode fast enough. And you're not getting anything out of EV mode. Like, it doesn't feel like you're getting this amazing Tesla torque or anything. It's just kind of, it's laborious. So there's all of that. That's kind of how I describe it. I think the transmission calibration is just, it's kind of off. I think you put it in sport mode, and I do think it's better because it feels like things are calibrated a little more aggressively, and the transmission is more on its toes. So that's kind of how I sum up the powertrain. Where do you land on it? Am I crazy? Am I missing something? How do you, you spend a lot of time behind the wheels too. Any other symptoms or problems you could diagnose here, Dr. Palmer?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with it. Like, I do not like this plug-in hybrid powertrain. There's very few things that I actually did end up liking about it. Like, the only time where I think I was actually enjoying it was when I was, on some sort of a twisty back road, and the gas engine was always on. I'm going up and down the gears, and in that place, it seemed fine. It wasn't clunky. It wasn't like searching for whatever it was trying to search for. But no, just trying to daily drive it around town. You try to accelerate from a stoplight, and so this is after the battery is fully drained. The gas engine will, it'll click on right away, and then you'll get this almost like horrible groaning and vibration feel through the whole car. And that's, that hits you through first gear, and then, you sort of almost feel like you slam a shift into second, and then the groaning noise goes away, and it's just, that the buzz of the 2.5 liter, which is a little too loud, a little too obtrusive at pretty much most times, except for if you're cruising. Man, that 8-speed clutch transmission, it's not smooth at all. Honestly, like, Mazda has had that 6-speed automatic for a long time that they put in most things, and it is like vastly superior to this 8-speed new transmission, I think. I didn't even like driving it around in full electric mode either. It's not powerful enough, really. Like, even when you hold your foot to the floor, it goes, but some dude in a Subaru Impreza that has like 180 horsepower that can barely accelerate is moving faster than you, and they are barely trying. And it's not great to accelerate onto the highway. Like, you will eventually get up to about 70 miles per hour, but you're probably going to want the gas engine to kick on and help you out to actually get there safely. And even when you are driving in that full EV mode, because the electric motor is sandwiched between engine and transmission, you shift. So you feel every single shift when you are driving on electricity. So, there's not even like smooth, seamless acceleration when you're under electric power. You still get the rough shifts that kind of, just you sort of move forward and back. And it's not smooth. It feels like it needs another year in the cooker, honestly. Needs more work, needs a new transmission, needs a whole lot of refinement to the current transmission. I would, like you said, I would recommend buying the inline six, honestly. Like, I would not buy this plug-in hybrid as it stands.
Yeah, I think we'll see if they could get a mid-cycle refresh here. I don't know I think it's going to be more than just like flashing some things. Like, I think they need to like get literally under the hood and recalibrate some things, swap some hardware, and we'll see what happens. All righty. And this is, I think, one of the beauties of long-term tests is, I think, you go back and look at some of the first drives, even some of our competitors really grade this thing out pretty well. But you can tell it's like, they probably clearly didn't spend months with the car where like the same things happen and it's repeatable and you're like, oh, this is rough. So the long-term garage is Yeah, it can be a rough place, I guess, for automakers at times. So let's talk about the Nissan 370. You drove the 370. What year is this? The Z. We can talk about the 370 if you want, but or the 350 or the Datsun 240. But you drove the Z Nismo. I really like the new Z. I think it's got a romantic feel of like what a sports car should be. It's been a couple of years since I drove one. I was supposed to have one, was it last year? Maybe even 2 years ago. And they were going to send it around in December. And then they were like, you know what? We shouldn't send this car around in December because it can be a little unruly in a good way. So what did you do with this thing?
Yeah, man, this was the Nismo. Honestly, I think it might have been like my surprise car of the year so far.
Wow.
That I have driven.
Okay.
I like fell in love with this thing. I wasn't necessarily in love with the just the standard Z, the Z Sport or Z Performance. I liked them, to a certain degree. I think that they needed some modifications to really get it to where you wanted the car to be. Especially when we compared it to the Supra in a comparison test. The Supra was just like leagues ahead of it in terms of handling, response, steering, braking, all of the good performance things that really matter to drivers when you're looking to buy a 2-seat sports car. The Nismo fixed all of that, honestly. This thing is honestly on the same plane of existence as far as handling, response, and feel as the Supra at this point, which is like really, really impressive. They did a ton of stiffening to the chassis, cross bracing, you name it, bushings, like everything underneath went for like a full overhaul. New springs, new dampers, new wheels and tires, more power. The 9-speed automatic transmission, and yes, it is automatic only, is way faster, way more responsive. It feels like a different car, honestly, in a lot of ways. And that, like, this is kind of what I was hoping the regular Z would feel like, and that, like, this is a serious sports car at this point, with very high limits and super like razor sharp responses to steering, throttle, every single input. And it's a sweetheart too. Like it's like for sure it will snap on you because it's 420 horsepower to the rear wheels. But it is very, very controllable and just so nice to drive, I think. Sure, do I wish it was still offered in a manual? Yeah, I do. But that 9-speed automatic, I think, is really, really good. You can have a lot of fun tapping through the gears with it. Like huge surprise, honestly. Like Nissan took the Z and like went all out with it. And they put together like a hugely impressive package. And I really just cannot say enough good things about the handling. Some of that is all of the crazy chassis bracing and new stuff, but there's also some of it I think is the Dunlop SP Sport Max GT600 tires that are on the car, which are 200 treadwear tires, which are very, very sticky summer tires. They're honestly like what I put on my Integra for track days and whatnot, and what a lot of people use for track days. Very similar compound. So not great for not super warm weather. Like it has to be nice out for them to really stick and warm up and everything. When they do, this thing will run with pretty much anything. So Z Nismo, hugely impressive. The one problem, of course, is the price. This thing as tested, $68,000, which is a lot of money. When you look out there, what else can you get for $68,000? Well, you can get a BMW M2 for $68,000. You can obviously get a Supra for a good amount less than $68,000, which I would say is about this car's equivalent in terms of performance. You can get an Acura Integra Type S in the low 50s. It's just, you run the gamut of all of these other things that you can buy for a similar amount of money. And I sort of land at like, all right, you got to be like a Nissan enthusiast to kind of want this car. But unlike the regular Z, I think that what you're getting is a complete package. Like right out the door, you're getting this awesome performance car that you don't need to do anything to. And it's genuinely worth the money that you're paying for. So yeah, I really wasn't expecting to like this car as much as I did after driving the regular Zs and just being, mildly disappointed to somewhat satisfied. This car left me completely satisfied and happy with what Nissan did to it.
I think you do a really good job of outlining the overall completeness of this package. And there are things that I have not driven the Nismo, but I've driven the base car. And I would definitely agree with your assessment. Those are holes in the lower levels of the Z. Things that it feels like when you drive it, it feels like a little bit of an uneven effort. Now, when I got in the Z, the first few times I've driven it, I still was taken by the romantic design the 6-speed manual is rough, but rough maybe isn't the greatest word. I don't think it's great. I feel like they could have done a little better there. So especially from a performance perspective, I think if you're just kind of like rowing your way around town or even at like a casual track day, you're going to be fine. But I don't think it's super precise or anything. 384 is fine for the output. I don't think the car needs more, but you're talking like 420 something. I mean, that's going to really pull you back. That extra 40, I think, would probably be noticeable. Sometimes it's not in situations like this, but it's a relatively little car. So you add that into the recipe and it's going to boil over a little bit, which I think is good. So, I mean, long story short, you're kind of preaching to the choir. I would agree with people who say the Supra is better from a metric standpoint and from a cost perspective. But if you ask me which car I like better, I've always said the Z. I gave it some votes for North American Car of the Year a couple of years ago. It was relative to the field, and it didn't win either. But I thought, hey, this is a very credible sports car that a lot of people could really enjoy. And I think your assessment of how much better than Nismo is relative to the lower trims also, I think, puts into context how base levels of certain cars, especially in like the luxury of the performance segments, the Charger, for example, they are incomplete compared to the ones you'll pay more money for, but they still get you into that space. So you can still get a Nissan Z for somewhat reasonable price. Is it going to be a performance ripper? No. Is it going to have some, holes in the overall execution? Yes. Is it still a great car? I would argue yes. For enthusiasts, though, it sounds like you got to go Nismo or something else.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend going with the Nismo, but just if you look at what Nissan did to this car, I think you can do a lot of what made it so good in the aftermarket.
You can,
and turn your Z into a quasi Nismo offering as well. I'm not sure that you can do it for the same price as what Nissan is offering for it. But I know that when we did do that Supra versus Z comparo, news editor Joel Stocksdale wrote an aside saying that maybe the Supra wins the comparo, but I think that the Z has the greater potential because it costs less than the Supra. The aftermarket support is there, and he was even surmising at the time that like you throw some mods at this thing, and I think it's really, really going to be good. And I think that the Nismo is honestly proof of that, in that you go at this thing with a scalpel to fix the things that may have been lacking before, and you got yourself one hell of a sports car. So yeah, it was big surprise. I can definitely recommend that. Like if you drove the Z, you were a little disappointed, maybe go try out the Nismo.
Yeah.
And I think that you might change your mind because I certainly did.
I think the Nissan has among the most character in the segment. I really do. I think across the board. So I assume the Nismo would only reinforce that opinion. So, all right. Well, that's our drive section. Normally I ask people sort of their food or drinking recipes. So I'll throw this over to you. What do you have any summer cooking ideas, grilling, things like that, your go-to so far? It's Memorial Day weekend, or any summer beers? Could always just default to that.
Yeah, so I'm actually just coming off a very summery weekend at the Tail of the Dragon, where we did a ton of grilling.
Nice.
So I had some friends that brought some tandoori chicken to grill.
That's fun.
We did a lot of burgers. It was, just hanging out at a sort of like a glamping type situation with the grill. So I can definitely recommend the tandoori chicken. That was fantastic on the grill.
Chicken can be tricky to grill, right?
Thankfully, one of my friends, his dad is like a famous chef who he learned from, and he was the guy that was grilling it up and doing a fantastic job at it. That combined with a little Oberon, because of course it is Oberon season now, was about as ideal as it could get down in the backwoods of Tennessee. So that's where I'm at right now.
All right, I will, listeners, I'll reinforce the chicken line here. I've been making a coconut chicken. It's kind of like a smoky chipotle coconut chicken. This recipe is in the New York Times cooking app. You could probably Google it. You can also bake it indoors if it's raining, like it seems like it is every other night, or in the fall or winter when it's super cold out. But grilling brings out the flavor. And I like it a lot. You chop up the chipotles, you marinate the chicken in this kind of like Coke can of coconut milk, and it comes out quite nice. It's grilling chicken though, man, I'll tell you, it's tricky because it tends to it's different than say brats or burgers that you can just flip and they generally don't stick. With this, it's like, it can stick to the grill, and then you can have flare-ups and it gets tricky. So I would recommend that. And it sounds like the tandoori chicken's a good option too if you're looking for some Memorial Day grilling options.
Without a doubt, I can recommend, and I do find that a little nice oil on the grill ahead of time,
it could help.
That's helped me in the past. Because I've had the same thing happen to me. It's just like, all right, now I got the chicken all over the grill.
Yeah.
What now?
Foil could help too. Foil and oil. You can maybe put some foil on like one side of the grill and move the chicken around. I did that with some turkey burgers I made the other night too. Jalapeno, garlic, and onion turkey burgers. So I've been grilling a lot. I've been drinking a lot of Coors Light just because I got like an 18-pack. I forget why. It was like one of those things where you need a lot of light beer. I don't know what that thing was. Maybe I needed to bring beer for a picnic, just something like that, where it's not an Oberon situation, but I'm looking forward to probably having an Oberon or some sort of summer wheat perhaps this weekend. So,
hell yeah.
All right. That's all the time we have. If you enjoy the show, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you might get the Autoblog Podcast. Send us your Spend My Money or your grilling recipes or your summer drinking recommendations. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there. Thanks. Shout out to our producer, Eric Meyer. Can't forget that. Again, be safe out there on this holiday weekend, and we'll see you next week.